Tonight we've got a perfect collection of soothing bedtime stories to help kids sleep. Let's get cozy and drift off together. Before we do, could you please tap subscribe? By doing this small thing, you'll let YouTube know you love what we do. Let's get ourselves cozy, snuggle down, and I'll begin. The Clumsy Dinosaur by Jane Thomas. Tonight's story is about a girl named Cece and her neighbour Spike. The unusual thing about Spike is that he's a dinosaur, half Snoozosaurus and half Snorosaurus to be precise. He moved in not so long ago, and Cece thinks he's the best neighbour ever, even if he does snore so loudly that she has to bury herself in soft mountains of blankets and pillows every night just to get her 40 winks. Ever since he came to live next door to Cece, the duo have been firm friends. I'd go so far as to say they're best friends. There's something a little magical about having an absolute best friend. Cece and Spike have things like their special goodbye, where they give each other a high five, a low five, and a behind five that ends with a wiggle and a jiggle. They know the minute they see each other whether it's the sort of day to go to the skate park and rush and whoosh around the course, seeing if they dare leap into the air, or whether it's the sort of day to sit on a park bench and share an ice cream while just being there for each other. Today, Cece has woken up very much in a go-to-the-skate park kind of mood. The sun is shining, the sky is blue, and she swears the birds on the branch by her window sound as if they're singing the tune of a Swiftie song. Just as she bounces down the stairs, jumping with 2 feet onto each and every step, she hears Spike next door doing the exact same thing. And just as her mother comes to the bottom of the stairs and says, "Try and be quiet, Cece," she hears Patricia, that's Spike's mother, telling him the same thing too. But nothing is going to break Cece's good mood today. While she's waiting for the toast to pop, she dances round the room. And when she spreads the jam, thick, full of whole strawberries that she squashes with glee onto the toast, she sweeps the knife back and forth to the rhythms of a song she's humming to herself. "Toast," she sings to herself. "Toast for me, covered in lovely strawberry." Her mother smiles as she passes her a glass filled to the brim with watermelon juice. Cece grins and sings another little song. "I shall have some juice to drink, juice that's thick and sweet and pink." She takes a huge gulp, then wipes her hand across the back of her mouth, cleaning away the pink moustache that appeared. "Is it all right if Spike and I go to the skate park?" she asks, hopping from foot to foot. "Don't forget Spike's cousin is here for a visit. He'll have to go with you," says her mother. Cece stops for a moment. She'd quite forgotten the cousin. "I believe," her mother went on, "he's an Acrosaurus. Yes, I'm sure that's what Patricia said." Cece had no idea what an Acrosaurus might be, but if he was a cousin of Spike's, then he must be a generally excellent dinosaur. She danced her way down the hall, danced her way into her shoes, and danced her way down the garden path, along the road, and down the path that led to Spike's front door. She was just reaching for the knocker when the door was flung open, and there was Spike, skateboard under his arm, ready to go. They gave each other a double fist bump and wiggled their shoulders, their special way of saying hello. And then Spike stepped aside and introduced his cousin Dizzy. He'd been born in the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains in the USA, land of hills and valleys and mysterious mists, that swirled and whirled above the trees and swept their way along with the rivers and streams. Dizzy was a delicate greyish-silver colour, with a ridge of orange spines that grew from his back, almost as if they were a mountain range, and his long tail slipped along the hall as if it were a rippling silver stream. Cece reached past Spike and shook Dizzy's hand, asking him if he liked skateboarding. "Oh, he's never tried," interrupted Spike before Dizzy had a chance to speak. Dizzy shrugged and smiled. "But it sounds fun," he said. "I'd love to try." Spike was already out the door and heading up the road, calling over his shoulder for the others to catch up. Dizzy dashed outside, his long tail catching on the table that stood in the hall and sending it and everything on it flying. A pile of papers flew up into the air, landing in a completely different order all over the floor. Pens shot off in all directions. A lamp seemed to hover in mid-air for a moment before crashing down onto the carpet. And Patricia came racing out of the kitchen, tea towel still in her hands. "Oh gosh, I'm sorry," said Dizzy, desperately scrabbling to pick things up. As he turned to help, his tail brushed against the pictures hanging on the wall, making them lurch and swing at alarming angles, as if they were trying to dance themselves away from their hooks. "Whoops, sorry," said Dizzy, reaching for the pictures and holding them in place, his long tail clipping a coat stand and sending that with a wallop and a thump onto the floor too. He looked around desperately, trying to decide what to pick up first. But Patricia answered that for him by smiling and shooing him outside. Looking over her shoulder before she closed the front door behind her, Cece saw that there was a general trail of chaos inside the house. As Dizzy knocked over a plant pot in his rush to catch up with Spike, she had a strong suspicion she knew exactly who had caused all that mess. The walk to the skate park was just as chaotic as Cece had a feeling it might be. If there was something to trip over, a curbstone, a street sign, a litter bin, then Dizzy would trip over it. He knocked over the giant ice cream cone that stood outside the newsagent's, and Spike just caught it in time before it hit the ground. Poor Dizzy spent the whole walk apologising both to Cece and to Spike, and to random lampposts and pillar boxes he walked into. It was Spike's skateboard, so he had the first go swooping around the course, racing up and down the curves and ending with a quick spin of the skateboard. Cece high-fived him and went to have her turn, not daring to go quite as fast as Spike, but still putting in an impressive performance. Dizzy watched them both carefully, seeing exactly what they did, how they bent their knees in one place, how they pushed the board with a foot to gather speed, how they leaned back when they wanted to slow down. And he did his very best to copy just what they'd done. Somehow, he managed to fall off before he'd even put both feet on the board. Then, when he was halfway to standing up, he tripped over the board and fell again. Finally, he was on the board at the top of a slope, and it took off towards the bottom with him shrieking, a sort of combination of delight and horror that ended with him colliding with a tree. Dizzy was so rattled by the whole thing, he even apologised to the tree. They spent a lovely few hours racing around the course. Dizzy no better at the end than when he'd started, but still with a smile on his face. And then Cece pulled out her purse and counted the coins her mother had given her, announcing that they had more than enough to go to the little cafe in the corner of the park. The three of them set off, Spike steering them along the route with the least obstacles for Dizzy. He made sure they didn't go anywhere near the pond, but that did mean they needed to go close to the freshly planted flower beds. And, of course, Dizzy saw a squirrel and got distracted and tripped over a bench and, well, the three of them had to sort of guess where the flowers might have been as they rushed to put them back in the ground in some kind of order. To cross the river, they had the choice of the little wooden swinging bridge, the one that Cece liked to try and cross as Spike stood there shaking it, making it rush from side to side and up and down as she tried not to trip. Or they could go over the stepping stones, hopping from one to the next and hoping they never missed and fell in the stream. On the whole, it seemed safer to go with the stepping stones, and it should come as no surprise to learn that by the time they arrived at the cafe, the three of them were dripping wet. Dizzy had stumbled and tripped and grabbed at Cece and Spike so many times that they'd all ended up in the river at one point or another. Cece squeezed the water from her t-shirt as well as she could, and was very glad she chose to wear dark shorts that day, so you couldn't really tell, well, not from a distance at least, that they were soaking wet. Of course, poor Dizzy knocked over half the tables and chairs on his way to the counter to look at the cakes, and when he turned to pick up one chair, his long tail got in the way and somehow knocked over another. "He's wonderful," whispered Spike to Cece, "but I have never known such a clumsy dinosaur." Cece giggled. "His spikes get redder and redder the more embarrassed he gets. I don't think anyone minds, really. It's just funny to watch." They finally settled on the idea of taking their cakes and drinks across to a huge open area of grass and sitting on the ground. It seemed safer than staying in the cafe. Cece lay back with a sigh, her head resting on Dizzy's chest and her feet on Spike's. She tore little pieces from her banana muffin and tossed them into the air, catching them in her mouth. This was something she'd mastered, and Dizzy watched on, impressed by the skill. He eyed up his chocolate chip muffin and considered trying the same thing, but, on reflection, decided it was best to eat it as he normally did. That was quite messy enough, after all, without adding in the art of throwing. The three of them lay back and looked up at the sky, watching perfect little puffs of white clouds drift by and seeing how birds floated high, high on the thermals. A red and gold butterfly landed right on the end of Spike's nose, and he lay perfectly still, crossing his eyes to see it properly, all of them entranced as the butterfly opened and closed its wings, opened and closed, opened and closed, before slowly taking off and fluttering over to the flower beds. "Dizzy?" asked Cece after a while. "Do you mind if I ask you something?" Dizzy, his arms behind his head, quite content in the safety of staying perfectly still, said that of course he didn't mind. "Is it quite tiring being so very clumsy?" asked Cece. "Very," said Dizzy. "I try so hard not to, but it sometimes seems the harder I try, the more things I knock over." "Remember that time you knocked over the tent at Aunt Philly's wedding?" said Spike with a bit of a giggle. Dizzy groaned. "I'll never forget it," he said. "That's where I learned my trick, though." Cece sat up. "Trick?" Spike removed Cece's feet from his stomach and sat up too. "Yeah, what trick?" "I learned what to do when I don't want to be clumsy at all," said Dizzy simply. Spike spread his arms and pointed at the huge field they were sitting right in the middle of. "You've been pretty safe out here," he said with a laugh. "Oh, I can do better than a field," said Dizzy. "Find me a long length of rope and I'll show you." Cece and Spike exchanged a look. They were curious now. And so the three of them headed back towards home, with Cece rushing into the garage as soon as they returned. She knew that somewhere in there her father had a huge length of rope, all coiled up and neatly tied, and she hoped it was long enough for whatever trick it was that Dizzy could show them. She laughed at herself as she knocked over a pot of paint in her rush to find the rope. Perhaps Dizzy's clumsiness was rubbing off on her, she thought, as she cleaned the mess up with a pile of old newspapers. Cece took the rope outside to show Dizzy, and he put his head on one side and looked at the rope, seeing if he could work out how long and how strong it was. In the end, he gave a nod. "Right, now we need a couple of trees," he said. And both Cece and Spike looked towards the back of their houses, where two huge trees reached high up into the sky. "Will those do?" asked Spike. And again, Dizzy put his head on one side and seemed to be judging something about the trees. He gave another nod. Yes, the trees would do. "The rope," explained Dizzy, "needed to be tied between the trees, and it needed to be as tight and as straight as they could make it." This meant that Cece had to go into her back garden and climb up the tree a little, wrapping the rope around the trunk and tying the knot as tight could be, and then throwing the rest of the rope over the garden fence into Spike's garden. Spike then climbed up his giant tree and did the same thing, making sure the rope was pulled tight and straight and absolutely level. Dizzy looked up at the rope, then reached his arms above his head and held on, slowly allowing his whole weight to hang from the rope that stretched between the two trees. It seemed to be firm, so he pulled himself up, swinging himself around quickly and dancing onto his 2 feet. With his arms held out to his sides and his eyes closed, Dizzy walked along the tightrope they had created. He walked as easily as you or I might walk along a sidewalk. There was no pausing, no hanging around, no moment when he wobbled. For the first time that day, Dizzy was calm. He walked to and fro between the two trees, first towards the one in Cece's garden, and then back towards the one in Spike's. And then he repeated this, still with his eyes closed and seeming somehow to know when he reached the end of the rope and turning in perfect time. Eventually, he came to a stop above Spike's garden, opened his eyes and grinned, then hopped down from the rope. Cece pulled a chair over to the fence and stood on it, looking over into her best friend's garden where she saw Spike high-fiving Dizzy. "Bravo!" she cheered. "Amazing! But how'd you do it?" Dizzy reached up and lifted Cece over the fence, setting her down on the ground and sitting beside her. Spike joined them, so the three of them made a sort of triangular kind of circle, there at the end of the garden. Dizzy told the other two to copy what he was doing, and he held his arms out by his sides and closed his eyes, breathing in slowly and deeply for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then breathing out slowly and fully for 1, 2, 3, 4. He repeated this, and the others joined in, taking long, slow breaths that they held for a moment before releasing them back into the world. As I breathe in, Dizzy explained, I move my left leg forwards on the rope. I imagine that I'm floating high, high above the world. I'm there with the birds in the day and the stars in the night. I can look down and see the valleys far, far below. The valleys where I was born, where the mist swirls and whirls and sweeps its way along with the rivers and the streams. And then, as I breathe out, I put my right leg forwards on the rope, and there I am, far above the trees, far above the highest buildings, away from the noise of the traffic and the busyness of everything. I am perfectly calm and perfectly still. And there is nothing for me to bump into up there, as long as I keep breathing slowly in and breathing slowly out. He stopped speaking and smiled to himself, opening his eyes and looking at the faces of Spike and Cece, both completely calm and with soft smiles resting in place. Slowly, they too opened their eyes and grinned across at Dizzy. It's how I fall asleep, too, said Dizzy. Even when I need to listen to this snoozosaurus snoring and rumbling his way through the night. He nudged Spike in the ribs as he said this. He leaned over and whispered loudly into Cece's ear, making sure Spike could hear what he said. Try it, he said. Imagine you're walking on a tightrope far above the world, and I promise you'll soon fall asleep too, even with the noise coming from Spike's room. That evening, Cece explained to her mother what Dizzy had taught her, and she smiled and said yes, that was what an acrosaurus did. And Cece suddenly realized that the start of acrosaurus sounded a bit like the start of acrobat, and her mother nodded and smiled and said yes, it meant heights. And Cece decided to see if she had a little bit of acrosaurus somewhere inside of her as she rested her head on her pillow and curled up to fall asleep. As she closed her eyes, she took a deep breath in and imagined moving her left leg forwards on a tightrope far, far above everything else. The sun was just setting and cast a soft golden glow over everything. So, as she looked down, she saw golden birds returning to golden nests in golden trees. A stream ran along as if it was melted gold and poured its way into a golden pool, ripples spreading out in ever-growing circles as a golden frog hopped from a golden stone into the waters. And then she was slowly, so slowly, letting her breath out. And as she did, she imagined moving her right foot forwards and looking across at the first silver sparkles of stars in the sky. So close, it almost seemed as if she could touch them. An owl flew silently past, great wings sweeping gently up and down, up and down. The breeze rushing against her face as he slowly drifted from one side of the world to the other. A deep breath in, her left leg forwards, and a golden dragonfly landed on the very tips of her golden fingers, its wings a shimmer of silver and gold in the fading light of the day. Slowly releasing the breath, she looked down towards a golden sea, gentle waves rising and falling, a golden beach lined with golden palms that swayed back and forth, back and forth. And Cece never noticed the snores of the dinosaur next door, because the mist-grey dinosaur, with the tail that stretched as if it was a stream of silver, had shared his secret with her. She, too, could walk across the valleys of the Great Smoky Mountains. She, too, could stride above the deserts with their shifting sands. She, too, could look down on temples and rivers, mountains and forests, and balance on a thread as slender as silk that reached from one side of the world to the other. Koko's Bedtime by Gillian Rogerson. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. The youngest member of the family was called Koko. Koko's favourite time of the day was bedtime. He loved having a warm bath and then sitting in front of the fire as he sipped hot chocolate. And he loved his soft, fleecy pyjamas because they made him feel all warm and cosy. But most of all, he loved snuggling down in his comfy bed and listening to a bedtime story. The stories always made him fall asleep quickly, and, like all koalas, Koko loved sleeping very much. It was early evening in Sleepy Forest, and the koala family had just finished their supper. They settled back in their chairs and talked about their day. Koko told everyone about the adventures he'd shared with his friends and the fun they'd had. He covered his mouth with his paw to cover up a yawn. Just talking about his day was making him feel tired. Koko listened to what everyone else had done. It sounded like they'd all had a wonderful day. Grandma looked towards the window and said, "The day's not quite over yet. It's a beautiful evening, and the sun will set soon. Why don't we go for a stroll and take in the evening air?" Grandpa declared that to be an excellent idea. He stood up and began to clear the plates away. Koko helped him, and between the two of them, the table was soon cleared. Grandma took her purple shawl from the coat rack and wrapped it around her shoulders. She took Koko's little coat from a hook and helped him into it. Koko fastened the buttons and pushed his paws into the deep pockets. The rest of the family gathered their outdoor clothes and put them on. The koalas left the cosy cabin, walked down the veranda steps and towards the forest path. Koko took one paw out of his pocket and held it out to Grandma. She took it in hers and smiled down at him. Koko smiled back. Grandma's paws were always warm, just like her hugs. The koala family entered the forest and walked along the path as it meandered through the leafy trees. Calming scents of lavender and rose drifted on an evening breeze towards them. Koko gazed at the sky. It had turned a darker blue, and there were delicate layers of pink and orange on the horizon. Koko noticed the first star had appeared in the sky and pointed it out to Grandma. The star twinkled brightly, shining like a diamond on a bed of navy velvet. Mother Koala looked up at the sky too and said, "That star looks brighter tonight. And can you see the moon over there, Koko? Behind the oak tree? It seems fuller this evening. It feels like there's magic in the air tonight." Grandma laughed lightly and said to Koko's mum, "You always say that. Every night feels magical to you. You felt that way since you were Koko's age. What is it about this time of day that feels so special?" Mother Koala thought for a moment. A smile slowly spread across her face. She said, "It's the special time when everything has been done for the day, but it's not quite time for bed yet. It gives me the chance to unwind and clear my mind of all thoughts of the day. And I look forward to that time when I can snuggle down in my bed, drift off to sleep, and get lost in wonderful dreams that await me. It feels magical." Grandma nodded in understanding. She looked at the bright star and said, "The evening does seem extra enchanting tonight. Koko, what do you like about bedtime?" Koko said, "Everything. I love my soft bed and cuddling my teddy bear. I love wearing my pajamas, especially the ones with ducks on them. I love having a warm bath and putting the bubbles on my nose, and then sitting in front of the fire and watching the flames." He grinned. "Not with the bubbles still on my nose. I wipe them off before I get out of the bath." Grandma and Mother Koala smiled at Koko. Koko said, "Do you know what I love most of all about bedtime?" "Is it listening to bedtime stories?" Grandma asked. "It is," Koko said. "How did you know?" "Because that's the first thing you ask for as soon as you get into bed." Koko chuckled. Grandma was right about that. The koalas continued walking along the forest path. The sky darkened and more stars appeared. Grandpa and Father Koala were a little ahead on the path and kept looking back over their shoulders and smiling at the others. In the distance, an owl hooted gently. A mother rabbit stood at the entrance to her burrow, looking at the night sky. She saw the koalas and said, "Isn't it a lovely night? It seems to me that the stars are shining more brightly this evening." The koalas smiled in agreement. 3 little bunnies popped their heads out of the burrow and called out, "Good night," before disappearing back into the family home. Mother Rabbit said good night too and went to join her family. The sky turned a darker shade of blue. Many more stars twinkled into view, and the full moon took centre stage amongst them. The family came to a sleepy sloth lying on the bough of a tree. Her arms were wrapped around it in a hug, and her head rested softly on the branch. Koko smiled. The sloth was his good friend Fudge. She loved sleeping even more than he did. Fudge blinked sleepily when she saw the family. She opened her mouth and looked as if she were going to say something. The koalas stopped walking and waited for Fudge to speak, but the little sloth closed her eyes and fell asleep instead. She began to snore gently. Grandpa whispered, "Good night, Fudge. Sweet dreams." The family continued walking through the forest. Baby otters were wallowing in the warm waters of a nearby river with their families. Some were floating on their backs and gazing at the stars. A family of frogs were standing at the side of the river and practicing their evening yoga moves. Their green arms stretched towards the sky as though reaching for the stars. A mole was sitting on a rock with his eyes closed. When Koko asked Grandma what the mole was doing, Grandma said he was meditating. Seeing the bewildered look on Koko's face, she explained, "It's a way of quieting your mind. Look at the mole. See how he's taking slow, deep breaths. It helps him to relax. I do that sometimes too." Koko nodded and said he might try some meditating later on. The family continued along the forest path. They saw more animals getting ready for bedtime. A hedgehog was collecting fallen leaves and taking them into a hollowed-out log to make himself a comfy bed for the night. Squirrels finished their evening feast of crunchy chestnuts and scrumptious sunflower seeds before heading into the comfy boughs of trees. Groups of field mice were brushing their teeth, washing their little faces and combing their fur. Some were already dressed in their comfy night clothes. The koala family strolled onwards under the darkening sky. Cicadas chirped from night-fragranced grass at the side of the path. Fireflies flittered and fluttered through the trees. The calming scent of chamomile flowers drifted towards the koalas on a soft evening breeze. Twilight tunes came from the birds as they settled down snugly in their nests for the night. Moonbeams cascaded through gaps in the trees and lit the way ahead for the koalas. The koala family soon met another of Koko's friends, a little bear called Napoleon. He was sitting outside his cave with his family and looking at the night sky. He gave Koko a sleepy wave. Napoleon's mother smiled at the koalas and said, "Isn't it a beautiful evening? I've never seen so many stars." Napoleon is trying to count them. She smiled at her son. The little bear was pointing to the sky and quietly counting. When he got to 8, he let out a long, long yawn, blinked his eyes, and started all over again. He rested his head against his dad, and before he could count to 4, the little bear was asleep. Koko yawned. He was feeling sleepy too. Grandpa noticed how tired Koko was becoming and said it was time they headed back home. They took a shortcut that led them away from the path and through the trees. They met another of Koko's friends along the way. This time, it was a beautiful fox with amber-coloured fur. She was called Autumn, and she loved wandering through the forest of an evening. Autumn said hello to the family and walked with them a little way. She loved telling stories, and at Koko's request, she told them one about an owl who talked to the moon every night, and sometimes the moon would ask her to polish the stars using her feathers. Koko smiled. He had heard that story before, and it was one of his favourites. The koalas and the fox carried on walking. Very soon the koala's cabin came into view. Autumn said good night and went on her way. Koko climbed the veranda steps, still holding paws with his grandma. Once inside the home, Father Koala said he would run a bubble bath for Koko. Koko took his coat off and hung it up. He took Grandma's purple shawl and put it next to his coat. He helped tidy up the living room. He made sure his toys and books were put away neatly. Koko heard his father calling out to say his bath was ready. When Koko went into the bathroom, he saw a mountain of bubbles bobbing on the surface of the water, just how he liked it. He took a deep breath. He could smell roses and lavender, and there was a hint of peonies too. He loved all of those smells and took another deep breath of the calming perfume. Koko climbed into the warm bath and lay back in it. Some of the bubbles began to gently pop. Father Koala sat in a chair at the side of the bath and chatted to Koko. Koko moved his arms through the warm water and gathered some of the bubbles together. He tried to make them into a castle, but the bubbles looked more like a cloud. Koko didn't mind. He loved clouds, and sometimes he dreamed about floating through the sky on a fluffy white cloud. He decided to make more clouds out of the bubbles. When he had enough clouds, he made himself a bubbly hat and gave himself a bubbly beard too. His father laughed. Koko asked him to lean closer, and when his father did, Koko gave him a bubbly hat and beard also. His father looked at himself in the mirror and said he looked very handsome indeed in his new hat and beard. The two koalas took the bubbles from their heads and gently blew on them. The bubbles floated through the air and landed softly in the bath. Koko lowered himself further into the scented water. It felt so warm and relaxing. He yawned. His father said it was time for Koko to get out. Father Koala took a fluffy towel from the warm radiator, and as soon as Koko got out of the bath, he wrapped it snugly around his son. Koko's favourite pyjamas were on the radiator too. the ones with the yellow ducks on them. Koko dried himself and then put on his pajamas. They had been out on the washing line that morning and smelled of sunshine and warm breezes. Father Koala and Koko went into the living room. Grandma was about to close the curtains. Koko walked over to her and helped. Before closing the curtains, they looked at the bright full moon and the twinkling stars. They heard an owl hooting in the distance. Koko wondered if it was the owl who sometimes polished the stars, and if she was going to clean them again tonight. The curtains were closed, making the cabin feel even cozier. Grandma smiled at Koko and said he smelled of lavender and roses. And peonies too, Koko said with a smile. She took his paw and they walked over to the sofa. The fire had been lit and it crackled gently in the hearth. Koko sat on the sofa between his grandma and mother. He gazed at the fire and watched the flickering red and yellow flames dancing over the logs. He blinked tiredly. Grandpa settled down in the rocking chair next to the fire and pulled a blanket over his knees. He began to rock back and forth in a soothing motion. Koko's father brought in a tray of drinks and put it down on a table at the side of the sofa. He handed the drinks to the family and gave the smallest cup to Koko. Koko wrapped his paws around the cup and smiled happily. The cup was full of hot chocolate and was topped with a swirl of cream. The drink was just the right temperature for the little koala. Koko took a sip and felt the chocolatey drink flowing into his tummy. His grandma and mother cradled their cups and began to drink their hot chocolate too. Father turned on a couple of lamps in the corners of the room and asked if everyone's drinks were okay, and did anyone want any more? Grandma said it was the best hot chocolate she'd ever had, and 1 cup was more than enough for her, thank you. Mother Koala said she'd already drunk hers because it was so delicious, but she wouldn't have any more because she was already feeling sleepy and would be heading to bed soon. Grandpa said he'd finished his drink too, and like Grandma, 1 cup was plenty for him. He asked if anyone would like to listen to him playing the ukulele. The koala family never said no to Grandpa and his ukulele. They loved listening to him. Grandpa picked up the pink ukulele that was resting next to his chair and cradled it in his arms. He began to gently pluck the strings. A beautiful harmony arose from the instrument. In a deep, soothing voice, Grandpa started to sing about a fairy called Midnight and how she danced with the stars one magical evening. Koko loved that song. He finished the rest of the hot chocolate, put his cup down and closed his eyes. The mesmerizing melody coming from the ukulele wrapped around the koala like a warm blanket and made him feel cozy and warm. Koko yawned sleepily. Grandpa sang another song, his voice warm and soothing. The fire crackled quietly. Koko yawned again and leaned against his grandma. Grandma kissed the top of his head and said it was bedtime for Koko. Koko opened his eyes and asked if he could still have a bedtime story. "Of course," Grandma said. "Come on, little one. Say goodnight to everyone." Koko pushed himself off the sofa and gave Grandpa and his parents a hug. He tried not to yawn too much, but he couldn't help himself from letting out a couple of yawns. He was so very tired. Grandma noticed how tired he was and scooped the little koala into her arms. She took him into his bedroom and put him into bed. She tucked a soft bed cover around him. Koko smiled and snuggled down into his bed. He reached for his teddy bear and cuddled him against his chest. He smiled happily. He loved his bed. Grandma turned on the lamp at Koko's side. It was in the shape of the moon and had a halo of twinkling stars floating around it. Grandma sat in the chair next to the bed and rested her hands on her lap. She asked Koko which story he would like to hear. Koko thought about all the bedtime stories he knew. He loved them all. He knew stories about a magical school where a brother and sister went on enchanting adventures together, and tales about a kind monkey who travelled the seas and made lots of new friends wherever he went. There was a story about a wise elephant who loved helping others, and another story about a magical carpet that could fly through the sky. Koko would love to have a carpet like that. Koko asked Grandma if they could have the story about the magic school, please. The one where the children first arrive at the school and the magic begins. Grandma said she liked that one. She asked if Koko was warm enough. He nodded and snuggled even further under the warm blanket. He closed his eyes and waited for Grandma to begin. Grandma started to tell him the tale of the magic school and the wonderful things that happened there. The words of the story drifted into Koko's mind, and he found himself happily transported into another world. He remembered what Grandma had told him earlier about taking slow, deep breaths to help him relax more. The little koala began to take some deep, relaxing breaths in and out, in and out. The bedtime story continued. Grandma's voice was low and soothing. Koko took some more relaxing breaths in and out, in and out. A delightful drowsiness flowed through his body, from the top of his head down to the tips of his toes. His blanket was warm and snuggly. His bed was soft and cozy. The story continued. Grandma's voice was low and soothing. Koko smiled softly. The little koala fell into a deep, relaxing sleep and was soon lost in restful dreams. The Cactus Who Wanted a Cuddle by Susanna McLaughlin. Under the warm orange sun, in a vast desert in Mexico, there stood a single cactus named Rosa. Rosa was large and impressive, with shiny spines all over her body, including her 2 dark green limbs, which stretched out on either side of her. She had carefully grown herself a small orange flower, which sits perched on her head. Rosa was happy in the desert. She spent her days in the wilderness, watching the endless desert skies turn from pink to purple to blue and to streaky orange and pink once more, before it turned inky black and became covered with hundreds and thousands of twinkly stars. She looked out across the sand, being warmed and relaxed by the sun, and then bathed in the calm of the moon. She saw rolling hills rising in the distance before her, and a stretch of desert, empty and clear aside from some other cacti like her, far, far away on the horizon. She enjoyed watching lizards and insects scuttling by, and she always called out her hello. However, Rosa wished she had some friends nearby to teach her about the world beyond her patch of desert. The other animals didn't often stop to chat. They all thought she must be a prickly character due to her long, pointy spines. This cactus was not prickly, though. Not at all. She was a happy, loving plant, and all she wanted was a cuddle and a friend to talk to. Rosa did everything she could to look more cuddly. She concentrated really hard and carefully grew 3 more flowers on top of her head. 1 blue, 1 pink, and 1 more orange. Orange was her favourite colour, after all. She wore this new flower crown and beamed a big smile at all the creatures that scuttled by. Some smiled back now that she wore her crown. In particular, a large tortoise named Thomas, who plodded slowly by. He had a big, dusty brown shell, splodged with shades of amber and cream. His skin was wrinkly, and he wore a big, toothless smile. His face was friendly and peaceful. Rosa asked Thomas where he was going. He said he was headed over the hill as there was an oasis there. He described it as a glistening turquoise pool, as clear as glass, sparkling in the sunlight. He said it was the most deliciously cool and crisp water in the world, especially tasty in the dry heat of the desert. Rosa had never seen or heard of such a place, but she enjoyed dreaming about it. "What is over that hill, there?" she asked. "Over there? There is a town of people," the tortoise said. He explained that in the town people worked and played and sang music together. He said there were dogs running between colourful market stalls playing with the children. He said there were guitar bands and parties and plenty of delicious food. He said there were houses there painted terracotta, and shops and small restaurants where the waiters wore embroidered aprons. And there were many, many flowers there too. Lots of green leafy plants, shrubs and trees in little pots. Rosa thought it sounded wonderful. All those people together having fun. Thomas had continued plodding by as they had been chatting. He did move rather slowly after all. Rosa would have enjoyed talking to him all day and learning more about the world that lay out of sight. But he had an oasis to visit, and he was nearly out of hearing range. His hearing did not range far, as he was a tortoise. He had no ears on his little round head. Thomas and Rosa called goodbye to one another, and the cactus watched as he slowly made his way across the desert and over the hill, looking around with a content smile on his face. Rosa was very happy that the tortoise had chatted with her. She wiggled the flowers on the top of her head happily, and spent the next 4 peaceful days and nights dreaming of the world beyond the hills. Not many animals passed her by in this time, and none of them were very chatty. A hare hopped by, looking puzzledly at her spines, before galloping on over the hill. A little desert fox, with big pointy ears, sniffed around the ground, but he was too focused on the scent to pause and notice Rosa. A few butterflies landed on her head one afternoon, sniffing at her flowers, and Rosa laughed as their wings tickled her petals. On the 4th night, Rosa had drifted off to sleep, imagining how beautiful all of the night's stars must look, being reflected on the ripples of the moonlit oasis. She was smiling as she slept, swaying gently in the warm evening breeze. But all of a sudden, she awoke from her snooze as she felt a prickle on her leg. She looked down towards her feet. There was a little creature looking back up at her. "Hello," she said. The creature apologized. The animal shuffled on its little feet and explained that he had noticed Rosa standing there. He had spines too, you see, and so he thought they could be friends. He was an adventurous little porcupine, and he had lots of tales to tell her. Rosa's heart soared. The spiky little creature had given her a hug. She beamed at the prickly animal. He had a big pink nose, with 2 goofy little teeth sticking out below it. He had kind brown eyes and little paws which he bopped back and forth on bashfully. His brown furry body was covered in long black and white spines, many more than Rosa, and they were much pointier too. He introduced himself as Paolo, the porcupine. Rosa was in awe to meet someone so kind, who seemed to understand her feelings so deeply. She knew right away that Paolo was her friend. Paolo and Rosa sat under the stars and chatted for a while. Eventually, they both drifted off to sleep. Rosa swayed gently, and Paolo laid in the sand on his spines, pointing his little belly in the air towards the moon, snoring softly. When they awoke, the sky was pink. Paolo told Rosa he had been headed into town when they crossed paths. Rosa sighed dreamily and said she would like to hear of his adventures there, for she dreamed of going to the town too. Paolo went quiet, thinking for a while. He told Rosa that he would see her very soon and bade her goodbye, wiggling a little paw at her before shuffling off across the dust, a little spiky ball moving through the desert. Rosa waited for 2 days, excited for Paolo to return. At midday on the second day, she saw a spiky little shape returning towards her across the landscape. Paolo appeared to be pulling something along behind him, and a little figure was at his side. Paolo said a happy hello to Rosa when he arrived at her side and introduced his friend. His friend was a big dog called Xolo. Xolo was soft and brown with big flappy ears, which pointed straight up in the air. He stood tall on long legs and smiled, his tongue lolling, panting in the sun. Rosa was happy to meet him. Paolo explained that after meeting Rosa, he had been considering her dreams of adventure. He had an idea. His friend Xolo was the town gardener's dog. Paolo had met Xolo when climbing a tree in his garden. Xolo was very impressed with the way Paolo used his tail to climb the tall tree. He said that he looked like a spiny monkey. Paolo had asked for Xolo's help. Together, they were going to take Rosa on an adventure. They borrowed some tools from Xolo's owner, a trailer, a little shovel, some big gardening gloves, and a big terracotta plant pot, which had been painted with beautiful blooms, just like the ones Rosa wore on her head. The two creatures set to work, digging the dirt around Rosa's feet. Xolo whistled a jolly tune as they worked, and Paolo hummed along. Xolo carried a lovely tune, but Paolo was a little off-key. Rosa didn't mind, though. She was so happy to be with her new friends that she thought it was the most beautiful song in the world. With the soil loosened and a soft bed lining the pot, Xolo put the tough gloves over his paws and carefully lifted Rosa in, patting down the soil so that she felt snug and supported in her new, portable home. They both placed their paws on either side of the pot and, after the count of 3, hoisted her up onto the trailer. Xolo barked twice, pleased with their work, and Paolo did a happy dance, standing on his stubby back legs and wiggling his front paws in the air. Rosa couldn't believe that she was ready to go on an adventure. and finally discover what lay over the hills. Paolo told Rosa that first they were going to the oasis. Xolo said he wished he could come along, but he had to return the tools to his owner, who had a very busy afternoon repotting succulents in the town square. He told Rosa, though, that she needn't worry about returning the pot and the trailer. His owner had just gotten a shiny new wheelbarrow and wanted to give his old trailer, along with the pot, to the special cactus that his loving pet had told him all about. Xolo said he hoped that Rosa and Paolo would come to town that night for a party, where Rosa could hear the town folks' music and make some new friends. Rosa couldn't believe it. She cried one happy tear. Only one, of course. Water was scarce in the desert. She thanked Xolo, and they parted ways. Paolo and Rosa headed up the hill. Paolo clutched the pulley of the trailer with his strong tail and tootled over the dirt, pulling Rosa with ease behind him. As they neared the brow of the hill, Rosa saw something in the distance, a cluster of cacti, just like her. Paolo toddled over to the cacti, and they all turned to look with wonderment on their faces. They had never seen a cactus moving before. They all introduced themselves with a smile. The cacti's names were Cortez, Cedro, Cala, and Cotia, and they all were so pleased to meet Rosa. They had seen her in the distance from their hill, and they were so happy that she had come to say hello. They were pleased to meet Paolo, too, and they complimented him on the length and shine of his spines. Rosa asked Cala, Coti, Cedro, and Cortez if they too wanted trailers of their own. They said they didn't need trailers. They were happy on their hill, where they could look down over the plains, the town, and the oasis, all happily together. They did ask her if she would visit them again. Rosa said she would, and she and Paolo continued their journey over the hill. She saw the oasis from up high, lit up with the golden afternoon sunshine. It was breathtaking. Their descent down the hill was easy because Paolo could simply let her go. Rosa rolled on her wheels freely down the hill, coming to a stop at the soft sand that surrounded the oasis. Paolo jumped into the air and wrapped himself in a little ball, rolling around and around, tumbling happily down the hill, protected from any stones by his spines. Both were laughing happily together when they reached the water. The water was so light, so bright, and so beautiful. It was turquoise and deep, and they could look down into its depths as easily as looking through a window. Paolo dove in, and Rosa giggled as water splashed her, refreshingly cool in the warm air. The little porcupine swam in loops around the oasis, propelling himself with his little tail. His arms and legs were too short to swim on their own. He splashed Rosa whenever he passed. They both enjoyed their afternoon immensely. Rosa loved watching the twinkling light on the water, and she was happy to see other animals having fun too. She saw Thomas, her tortoise friend, on the other side of the pool. She didn't talk to him, though, because he was snoozing peacefully in the sun. Sleepy lizards of all kinds lolled on the water's edge. Little darting lizards with shiny brown skin, and big, leathery green lizards with wise, bulging eyes and long tails. When the sun had moved further across the sky, it was time for the two friends to return over the hill and head towards town. Rosa had excited butterflies in her stomach, as she had never met people before. Although sometimes she had seen their big, shiny vehicles zoom through the dust, far in the distance. She had heard so much about the joyous town folk, and she was excited to meet them. They made their way up the hill and rolled back down again. They crossed the flat of the desert, humming together as they went. As the first star began to twinkle in the sky, they heard the sound of lively music, which beckoned them across the sand towards town. Paolo would skip with every couple of steps, almost in time to the music. He wasn't the most rhythmic porcupine, but he did love music. They arrived at the town square and were amazed by its beauty. There were men and women and children in colourful clothes, dancing and eating and laughing together. The band played guitars of different shapes and sizes, and they all sang with enthusiasm. There were many plants like Rosa, in pots and flower beds around the square, and animals too, dogs and cats and lizards and birds, all enjoying the music. Xolo emerged from under one of the tables, which was laden with delicious-looking food, and greeted the animals. He introduced them to all of his friends, and they all danced together. Rosa and Paolo were so happy. At the end of the night, Rosa thought it must be time to return to the desert. She said goodbye to her new friends. She had spoken to the flowers in the shrubbery, who had told her of all the merriment that they observed every day. She had laughed with playful puppies and shimmied her spines to the lively music. She had had a wonderful time, but it was time to go to bed. Hopefully she could return one day. She was sure Paolo would be her friend forever, and that he would be happy to wheel her around on more adventures. Paolo yawned, and Rosa smiled. "Let's go back to the desert," she said. Paolo wrapped his tail around the pulley on the trailer and began to wheel her back towards the road. Both had sleepy eyes and tired bodies. They were ready to snooze. As they moved away, someone called out to them. It was the town gardener. Rosa and Paolo had met him earlier in the night and thanked him for his kindness. He had grey hair and crinkly brown eyes. His skin was tanned from all the time he spent outdoors, tending his plants attentively and with great care. He wore faded overalls and a colourful shirt. All of the townsfolk seemed to like colour and kindness. "Where are you going?" the gardener asked. You may return to the desert if you really wish. I know the nature is beautiful out there. It is incredibly peaceful in the stillness of the desert, under a million stars. But, if you would like, you may both stay here, too. There's a lovely spot in my garden for you, Rosa, and I know Xolo's kennel has plenty of space for a little porcupine like you, Paolo. The two friends looked at one another, beaming with happiness. They had found their family. They journeyed to the gardener's yard. He had a beautiful garden, with curling vines and beautiful tropical flowers. Each one was watered, trimmed, and tended to with love. In one corner, there was a dusty flower bed, full of cacti of all shapes and sizes, some spiny, some fuzzy, some smooth. Not far away was Xolo's kennel, a fairly large handmade wooden structure, painted in turquoise, pinks, and yellows. Xolo was already snoozing on a soft patch of grass nearby, his long snout poised on sleepy paws, his tongue still lolling as usual. He looked perfectly peaceful. Rosa chose her place in the gardener's yard. She asked to sleep near the low wooden fence so that in the morning, when she awoke at sunrise, she could watch the streets of the town beginning to swell with life, with children wobbling by on bicycles, and the scent of the baker's fresh bread drifting on the morning breeze. She had been dreaming of these things, and it was finally her chance to see them. To her left slept a tall cactus, too, with flowers of purple on her head. She, too, wore a flower crown like Rosa, for she, too, was happy and full of life. Rosa breathed in the cool air. Paolo parked her trailer and said good night. He tottered sleepily towards his new home and entered the kennel where he wrapped himself in one of the comfy woven blankets that Xolo had collected there. He knew that the generous Xolo would be more than happy to share. He and Rosa drifted off to sleep. They were so happy and peaceful under the stars. The happy cactus and friendly porcupine lived in the gardener's garden from then on, and they never tired of going on adventures. They strolled through the town, rolled down many hills, and swam in many a blue oasis. The two lived happily there, wrapped up in the glow of their new friendships and the comfort of their new home. Mrs. Fudge, the World's Best Teacher by Susanna McLaughlin. It was the first day of September, and a new school year was about to begin. The sun was shining, the sky was cloudless and clear, and all over town, children were preparing to return to school after a long summer of rest. For 7-year-old Isla, it was an especially big day. Today was Isla's first day at a new school. During the summer holidays, Isla and her family moved to a new house in a new town, which meant that Isla had to move schools. All summer long, Isla had been excited about starting at her new school. She couldn't wait to meet her new teacher and make lots of new friends. But now that the day to start was upon her, Isla felt a little bit nervous. She woke up with butterflies fluttering around her stomach and doubts running through her head. Isla hadn't seen her new school yet. What if it was really big and she got lost in the halls? Or what if it was so teeny tiny that there was no space for her to sit at a desk and she had to sit on the floor all day? What if playtime was only 10 minutes long? Or what if they only served mushy peas and smelly fish at lunchtime? What if she didn't make any new friends? What if she didn't like her new teacher? Those were the biggest worries dashing through Isla's brain as she woke up for her first day at her new school. Isla's mummy had laid out her school uniform on her bed, ready for her to put on after breakfast. Isla hadn't seen her uniform until now, and she gazed at it in awe. It was a very smart uniform. A navy blue jumper and a checkered pale blue dress were laid out for her. At the foot of the bed, a pair of shiny black Velcro shoes had been placed on the floor, along with a pair of white frilly ankle socks. Isla's mummy had also offered to style her hair in braids for the occasion. Isla would look very smart in her new uniform for her first day at school. Isla hoped that she would make a good impression on the other children. Isla's mummy made the whole family a yummy breakfast of pancakes and fruit to start their special day together. Mummy and Daddy were starting their new jobs today, while Isla went to her new school and her little brother, Freddie, started at his new nursery. It was a big day for everyone. Isla ate her breakfast slowly, pushing the chopped strawberries around her plate as she daydreamed. Her daddy noticed that she wasn't quite herself and asked, "What's troubling you, Isla? You look like you've got a lot on your mind." Isla sighed heavily and explained that she was nervous about starting at her new school. "What if I don't make any friends?" she sniffed. Isla's mummy and daddy assured her that she would make plenty of friends with time, once she'd gotten to know everyone in her class better. Isla's mummy added cheerfully, "I've heard that you have the best teacher in school. She's called Miss Fudge, and apparently she's very kind. Everyone seems to love her." Isla perked up a little thanks to her parents' encouragement and gobbled up the rest of her fruit before heading upstairs to get ready. She dressed in her white and blue checkered dress and the navy blue jumper. She pulled on her socks and folded them over at the ankle to perfectly bunch out the frilly lace around the hem. And finally, she slipped her feet into her shiny new shoes. As promised, Isla's mummy braided her tight curly hair in 2 braids at the back of her head and used 2 bright yellow hair ties to fasten them in place. Isla looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. She looked very grown up in her new uniform. She quite liked it. She already felt a bit more confident about starting at her new school today. Isla's mummy drove her to school while her daddy took baby Freddie to the nursery. As they pulled up outside the school gates, Isla's tummy began to tickle again as the butterflies returned. She clutched her lunchbox and her reading pack firmly in her hands and held them close to her body. Her mummy could see that she was tense and offered to hold her hand as they walked into school. Isla held her mummy's warm, supportive hand as they walked through the gate and into the playground full of people. There were parents waiting and chatting with each other, while lots of children chased each other around the playground or sat on the grass, talking and playing quietly. Everyone was happily settled into their morning routines while they waited for the school bell to ring and allow them inside. Isla hoped that someday soon she would be joining the children playing and not having to hold her mummy's hand for comfort. Isla's mummy walked her over to the far side of the playground, and they stopped outside the school building in front of a red door. The red door had 2 big windows in it, so she could see directly inside the cloakroom, and to its side was a huge classroom window. The window was decorated beautifully, with colourful paper decorations, children's paintings, and cut-out letters of the alphabet. All of the letters of the alphabet bordered the window and had been coloured in with an array of bright crayons. It was a very nice window display, and Isla smiled as she took it all in. All of a sudden, the red door opened up, and a woman behind it waved to Isla's mummy and beckoned her over. Isla and her mummy walked up to the classroom door and were greeted with a huge friendly smile from the lady on the other side. "Good morning, Isla," the woman greeted her, pushing her round spectacles further up onto the bridge of her nose, before continuing, "I'm your teacher, Miss Fudge. It's lovely to meet you. Are you looking forward to your first day?" Isla didn't know what to say. She suddenly felt shy, and the words wouldn't come to her mouth. Her mummy gave her hand a squeeze and tried to urge her to speak to her new teacher. But all that Isla could do was stare at Miss Fudge silently. Miss Fudge had bright orange hair cut into a bob, and she had big friendly eyes and an even bigger smile. She wore a long floaty purple dress and a long beaded necklace. She didn't look like a normal teacher. She looked like a fun one. Miss Fudge knelt down to Isla's level and smiled reassuringly at her. She whispered, "I know your first day at school can be a little overwhelming, but don't worry. I'm going to take good care of you and make sure that you have a really good day. You'll feel settled in no time." Isla's tummy butterflies seemed to calm down a little at Miss Fudge's encouraging words. She softened her grip on her mummy's hand and let out a little shy smile. Miss Fudge gestured inside the classroom past the big red door and asked if Isla would like to take a look at her classroom before all the rest of the children came inside to start the day. Miss Fudge could show her where to hang her coat and lunch bag, and which tray was hers to keep her book bag safe in. Isla nodded her head gratefully, and her mummy bent down to kiss her goodbye. She would pick up Isla at the end of the day, and she couldn't wait to hear all about Isla's first day at school. Miss Fudge held out her hand for Isla to take, and Isla gently took it. She was very glad that Miss Fudge was her teacher. She seemed very kind, and Isla felt safe in her presence. As promised, Miss Fudge showed Isla where everything was and helped her get set up for the day. Miss Fudge had saved Isla a seat at one of the tables so that she knew where to sit, and explained what order the lessons would run in. By the time the school bell rang and the other children started to come inside from the playground, Isla felt settled and had a clearer understanding of what to expect from the day. All of Isla's classmates came inside without their parents and put their bags and coats away efficiently. It was the first day of term for everybody, so all the children were very excited to see each other again. They had all been apart for 6 weeks of the summer, and they had lots of stories to tell each other. Miss Fudge helped the children find their new work tables and sat the class down to take the register. There were 8 children at Isla's table, including herself, and she was sat between a boy and a girl. All of the children were very intrigued to discover that they had a new student in their class, and everyone wanted to get to know her. The children sitting on either side of Isla eagerly introduced themselves. The boy to her right was called Ezzy, and the girl to her left was called Imani. Ezzy and Imani wanted to ask Isla lots of questions. They were intrigued to learn where she had lived before. It turned out that Imani's auntie lived in Isla's old town. They asked what her favourite hobbies were, which were gymnastics and art. Funnily enough, these were Ezzy's favourite hobbies too. And they asked if Isla had any brothers and sisters, to which she replied she had a baby brother called Freddie. Imani had 2 older sisters, and Ezzy was an only child. By the time Miss Fudge took the register to begin the day, Isla already felt welcomed into the class by Ezzy and Imani. To celebrate returning to school after the summer, they were going to start with an art class. Miss Fudge had a very fun special task for them all. She instructed the students to draw a picture depicting their favourite memory from the summer. The students could draw a picture of being on holiday with their parents, or a trip to the fun fair, or perhaps their favourite memory was a simple trip to Grandma's house that was very special to them. The students could draw whatever they wanted, so they set to work. Isla decided to draw a picture of her old house back in her old town, and then an image of their new house. She drew all of her family standing on the lawn of her old house, waving goodbye to their home, before drawing them in front of their new house, smiling. Miss Fudge was very impressed with Isla's drawing and gave her a gold star sticker for her effort. When everyone had finished their artwork, Miss Fudge asked a few students to show their drawings to the class and describe to everyone what they drew. A boy named Daniel stood up and showed his picture of the trip his family had made to a theme park. He animatedly described to everyone what it was like riding a roller coaster for the first time, and the whole class was captivated. Then Imani stood up to show her picture. She had drawn a colourful image of her and her family relaxing and playing at the beach. Imani's family had been on holiday to Mallorca, and it sounded like it had been a very nice time. Miss Fudge asked Isla if she would like to stand up and present her artwork to the class. Isla was hesitant, but she took a deep breath and stood up. She spoke as loudly and clearly as she could, remembering what she had learnt at her Saturday drama class. Isla showed the class her picture of the 2 houses and explained that she and her family had moved to a new town during the summer holidays. The students in her class were enthralled and had lots of questions that they wanted to ask her, but Miss Fudge limited the questions to just 3. Everyone could ask Isla as many questions as they wanted at break time. As Isla sat down after her little presentation, she felt relieved. Maybe she wouldn't struggle to make new friends after all. Everybody seemed to be very excited about having a new girl in the class. When break time came along, the children all raced outside into the playground, ready to burn off some energy after sitting so obediently in the classroom for a couple of hours. Everyone was so eager to get outside into the sun that they all forgot about asking the new girl if she wanted to join them. Isla stood at the edge of the playground and looked on as all of the children in the school pranced, ran, and twirled around in the playground, blissfully unaware of her watching from the sidelines. Isla sighed and sat down on one of the benches to eat her packet of grapes. She had worried that this might happen. She missed her friends from her old school. Everyone here already had their friends that they had known for years, so Isla felt left out. All of a sudden, someone sat down on the bench next to Isla. It was Miss Fudge. Miss Fudge smiled at her kindly and asked Isla if she was okay. Isla explained that she had nobody to play with and popped a grape into her mouth defeatedly. "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that," Miss Fudge said, gazing around the playground. "There are so many people you could play with. Let's go introduce you to some." Miss Fudge led Isla through the playground and over toward one of the flower beds. As they approached the plants, Isla noticed a girl and a boy knelt down in front of the soil. They seemed to be enthralled by a wooden box filled with shelves of different textured elements. Each shelf was crammed full of different things you could find out in nature. There was a shelf packed full of sticks, one stuffed with crispy green leaves from the trees, a shelf of pebbles, and one of pine cones. Isla thought she could even see some straw and shreds of cardboard in there. "What is that?" Isla asked Miss Fudge, staring at the odd box. Miss Fudge urged her to ask the children instead. They would know much more about it than her. Isla took a deep breath and stepped closer. She peered over the shoulders of the boy and girl and asked, "Excuse me, what is it that you're looking at?" The young boy and girl turned around, and Isla recognized them immediately as 2 of the other students in her class. They smiled and ushered her closer, declaring that the strange box, crammed full of different textures, was a bug hotel. Isla had never heard of a bug hotel before. "All these shelves are little hidey holes for the bugs," the boy explained. The girl added, "We made it for the bugs to live in. Different bugs like different homes, so we made lots of little rooms for them to choose from." Isla liked the idea of this bug hotel and knelt down with 2 children from her class. They showed her all of the bugs that were currently living there. There was a ladybird nestled in the leaves, and a couple of woodlice living among the wooden twigs. Plus, they had a caterpillar and a couple of snails taking shelter in there too. The Bug Hotel was a great way to observe and protect the wildlife, and the two classmates admitted it was fun to make. Isla enjoyed discussing the Bug Hotel with her classmates so much that break time went by quickly. Before she hardly knew it, the bell had rung for them to return to their classroom. Isla and her two new friends, Kendall and Harley, returned to their classroom, chatting all the way. As Isla sat back down in her seat at her classroom table, Miss Fudge gave her a little nod and a comforting smile. Their next lesson was maths, and Miss Fudge decided to mix up the tables so that everyone got a chance to work with new classmates. Isla was seated next to a girl called Charlie, and they worked together to solve the maths problems that Miss Fudge set out. The two girls were working really well together and whizzed through the first few questions, but then they came to a halt. They were stumped. They didn't know how to work the next question out. Isla was a bit embarrassed that she didn't know the answer to the question and didn't want to ask for help, but Charlie insisted that they ask Miss Fudge for assistance. Isla whispered to Charlie, "Won't Miss Fudge be disappointed that we weren't listening hard enough?" Charlie shook her head and chuckled. She replied, "Miss Fudge will understand. We can't know everything straight away. Miss Fudge always says that's why we come to school, to learn." Charlie held up her hand and Miss Fudge came over to help the girls. Miss Fudge didn't belittle them for not knowing the answer. In fact, she praised them for having the courage to ask for help. "Admitting you are lost or struggling is the hardest part," Miss Fudge said. "Once you ask for help, it's all easy from there." Miss Fudge patiently worked through the question with Isla and Charlie, and within a few minutes, they had worked out the correct answer. Isla and Charlie now felt confident to complete the rest of the questions on their own. Miss Fudge was very impressed with their teamwork and gave them both a gold star sticker. Isla now had 2 stars on her jumper and beamed proudly at her achievements. She couldn't wait to show her mummy at the end of the day. As lunchtime came round, Isla worried that she would be alone again in the playground. But she needn't have worried. As the children all grabbed their lunch bags from the cloakroom, Charlie asked Isla if she would like to play with her this lunchtime. Isla was delighted and followed Charlie out into the playground, where she spent the next hour getting to know Charlie and playing with her other friends, Jada and Cara. Isla had a wonderful time. When the end of the school day came, everyone packed up their things and put on their coats, ready to go home for the day. However, for Isla, she wouldn't be going straight home. She was booked into the after-school club today because her mummy and daddy were still at work. Isla stayed seated at her table, wearing her coat and holding her bags while Miss Fudge released the other students to their parents waiting outside. Once everyone was gone, Miss Fudge came back inside and told Isla to follow her. Miss Fudge would take Isla to the after-school club. As they walked along the shiny wooden corridor, Miss Fudge asked Isla, "Did you have a nice first day?" Isla admitted that she had, although she had been nervous that she wouldn't make any friends. Miss Fudge stopped outside a door and turned to Isla. She said sweetly, "You will always make lots of friends, Isla. You've just got to give it time." "Did you see how many people wanted to talk to you today?" Isla nodded, and Miss Fudge continued, "Exactly. Everyone wants to make new friends. And now, at the after-school club, you'll have even more opportunities to meet other kids your age. I have no doubt that you'll have more friends than you can count by the end of this week." Miss Fudge opened up the door and peered her head inside the room, greeting the teacher within. She introduced Isla to the after-school club leader and beckoned her inside. The after-school club room was so colourful and inviting. There were shelves and shelves of books, with a little reading corner set up, and each table was covered with activities to do. There were games like jigsaw puzzles, and there was an arts and crafts table. There was a Play-Doh table on which children were sculpting shapes, and at the table where the leader sat, the children were singing a song. Miss Fudge showed Isla where to leave her bags and coat, and asked what she would like to do. Isla liked the sounds of the song the children were learning, and went to pull up a chair at their table. Miss Fudge stayed by Isla's side until she felt comfortable leaving her on her own in the after-school club. "I'm going to go back to my classroom now, Isla," Miss Fudge said. "Your mummy will pick you up from here, so I'll see you tomorrow." Isla looked to Miss Fudge gratefully. She had helped her settle in really well today. Isla was very happy that Miss Fudge was her teacher. Even if Isla had a bad day or struggled to make friends, she knew that if she was ever stuck, she would always have Miss Fudge to turn to. Miss Fudge said goodbye and headed back to her classroom, leaving Isla in the capable hands of the after-school club. Isla had a wonderful time learning the song along with the other children, and afterwards she had a go at piecing together a jigsaw puzzle with one of the other students. One by one, the kids in the club were picked up by their parents, and Isla felt herself growing tired. It had been a busy first day at her new school, and she retreated to the reading corner to relax. Isla grabbed a book that she recognized off one of the shelves and curled up in the comfy corner, sitting down in a beanbag chair. She flipped through the pages of the book, reading the story and admiring the delightful images. As she did, she felt herself growing sleepier and sleepier until her eyes almost closed completely. Just as she was about to drift off in the reading corner, Isla heard the sound of her mummy's voice. She climbed up out of the chair and ran over to the door to give her mummy a big hug. They collected her coat and bags and walked out hand in hand to their car. Isla's mummy made sure Isla was fastened into her seat and then climbed into the driver's seat. As she drove home, she asked Isla how her first day at school had been. Between sleepy yawns, Isla told her mummy all about the classmates she had met and the girls she had played with at lunchtime. She described the bug hotel and the little creatures she had spotted within it, and how Miss Fudge had taught her how to solve a tough maths problem. She even sang the song that she had learnt in the after-school club. Isla's mummy was amazed that Isla had done so much on her first day at her new school. She was very proud of Isla for being so brave. Isla relaxed into her car seat and rested her head against the cool car window. She gazed out into the new street that she now called home and allowed her eyes to rest. As Isla succumbed to her exhaustion, she yawned and drowsily told her mummy, "Miss Fudge helped me all day. I have the best teacher ever." Now we're drifting gently from the waking world into the world of dreams. Our body is soft and heavy. Our arms are heavy and our legs are heavy too. Our breathing is gentle and relaxed. Our breath going in through our noses and down into our chests. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Just like the waves lapping back and forth, carrying you gently into sleep. In the waking world, our bodies are busy and active, but as we pass into the world of dreams, our bodies can relax. Let your bodies relax now. Let your eyes relax. Let your fingers relax. Let your toes relax. Feel all the muscles of your body sink down further into your warm and cozy duvet. Feel your body rest heavily down on the firm comfort of your bed. Now feel as your body relaxes how your mind is released. Feel just how free your mind is. The world of dreams is like a playground for your mind. There are swings and roundabouts and slides where your mind can play. In the world of dreams, your mind gets bigger and bigger and fills your sleep with all kinds of joys and wonders and magical stories. And here is something that not many people know, but it's a secret I'm going to tell you. But you're the only one I'm going to tell. When we go to sleep and pass into the world of dreams, we are accompanied by the kindly spirits who live in the dream world. They live on the moon, and when nighttime comes, they float down softly as silk to meet each person who is drifting into sleep. The dream spirits are waiting there for your mind to arrive, and when you get there, they take your hand in theirs and squeeze it gently and guide you through the world of dreams. Isn't that wonderful? To have a guide who can keep you company even as you sleepwalk through the world of dreams. They take you by the hand, they give you a friendly squeeze, they guide you into sleep. The spirits of the dream world ask you, what would you like to dream about tonight? And because your dreams are your very own playground, where you can build and create anything your imagination desires, you can answer however you like. Maybe tonight in your dreams you would like to climb a tree, sit in the canopy, surrounded by tinkling leaves and bathed in dappled moonlight, and listen to the nightingale sing, or the crickets chirrup from the forest floor below. Or perhaps you would like the dream spirits to guide you into a magical world where you can learn how to perform all kinds of wondrous spells and charms. You can go on adventures, flying through the air on your broomstick. The white clouds spread out below you like an ocean of fluffy marshmallows. Or maybe you'd like to visit a magical zoo, full of rabbits and puppies and kittens whose fur is so soft and comes in all kinds of different colours, brown and white and black, but also purple and green and blue. In this zoo you can find all kinds of animals that you can't find in the waking world. Animals people in the waking world say couldn't possibly exist. But they do. They do exist. And you know why? Because your mind is so powerful and rich and magical that in the world of dreams, anything is possible. Your imagination is an enchanted place. It can create whole worlds out of thin air, out of nothing. Anything your heart desires can be found in the world of dreams. So let your eyelids be heavy. Let your body sink into the warmth of your duvet. Let your body drift into a deep and peaceful sleep. And let your mind float away into the world of dreams. The dream spirits are waiting to guide you through their magical world, their world of wonder, their world of delight. See the soft smiles on their beaming faces. Feel the warmth of their hands in yours. They take you by the hand. They give you a friendly squeeze. They guide you into sleep. Walk with them and let them lead you on magical adventures into the world of dreams, to jungles of green leaves with all kinds of creatures ready to show you their lives, to castles built out of clouds, to rivers bright as rainbows for you to swim down, to crackling campfires next to lakes where the pitter-patter sound of rain sounds like the gentle tinkling of music. Remember to thank your dream spirits for guiding you lovingly through the land of dreams. Say, thank you, dream spirits. And when you say, thank you, dream spirits, the dream spirits will say, thank you back. Because the dream spirits are just as lucky to accompany you through your magical dream world as you are that the spirits are there to guide you. So let your eyes close, let the lids fall heavy. Let every part of your body, from the top of your head to the tips of your fingers and toes, be warm and heavy and sleepy. Let your mind slip into the peaceful world of sleep, where anything is possible. Good night.